Land reform is one of the most contentious issues in South Africa. Critics argue that the pace is too slow, and the governing party agrees. It's an issue that is quite emotive in this country. At this policy conference, there was yet another highly charged debate on land.
We had robust discussions on the modalities of achieving this. We agree that using the forecast for land redistribution must be accompanied by other measures if we are to achieve the goal at the required pace. Where it is necessary and unavoidable, this may include expropriation without compensation. The Constitution provides for legislative changes to be effected in the democratic process.
The ruling ANC is also mulling over the idea of nationalizing the South African Reserve Bank, but says its independence should be guaranteed.
Most importantly, we have clear proposals for improving our connection with our people on the ground and for accelerating the delivery of services to our people. All our members, leaders, and public representatives will focus on re-establishing the trust and confidence the people have always had in the ANC to be their servant and to deliver a better life for all.
Outcomes of this policy conference are mere proposals. They will be amended, endorsed, or even rejected at the ANC's elective Congress in December. Some delegates might come up with new policy proposals then and have them adopted. Yolisa and Njamela for CGTN in Soweto, South Africa.
All right, then let's dig deeper into all the content from South Africa. Sumitra Naidu joins us now live from Johannesburg with more on this story. Sumitra, among other things, starting with the IMF, the fund has called for wages to be more responsive to firm-specific circumstances, including productivity. That's a direct quote from the review. That sounds like criticism of the current mass bargaining or collective bargaining model with unions, doesn't it?
Well, yes and no, Rama. Collective bargaining was introduced, for instance, in the mining sector a few years ago and has been working better than when the unions were negotiating with different companies at different times. It brought about more clarity and clear guidelines set for a specific period. In the case of the mining industry, it's set for about 3 years at a time. This works as an assurance for workers and provides clear goals for the mining companies to ensure these wage agreements are met. But where the issue does arise is when wage demands are high or excessive, especially in a tough economic climate where the company is not producing as it did previously. Wage inflation becomes a problem when the company is not as profitable. So I think the statement is more about flexibility. Wages need to be linked to productivity and performance, and also the introduction of incentives during better times.
Indeed. The IMF's reforms, though, they cover a lot of issues, labour issues, governance matters, including the implementation of the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Act. Has there been any formal response to this Article 4 review from the government?
Well, there hasn't been any official response as yet. Having said that, of the issues raised in the article have been raised before. It's not clear if the finance minister will issue any statement, but interestingly enough, the new police minister has been very vocal about the IMF and its concerns. Just a few days ago, he dismissed rumours that South Africa will soon be in need of a bailout. He implied there were too many doomsayers that think that South Africa will need any IMF intervention and will go down the route of Zimbabwe. He said there was no ways that the government will sell the country off to the IMF, which kind of gives you a sense of what the feeling is towards the IMF and its various reports.
Indeed. Let's switch over to the public protector and her report. Pretty controversial. She, of course, has said she will oppose a judicial review of her recommendations on two key issues, reparations payments from ABSA and a change in the mandate of the South African Reserve Bank. What arguments is she likely to make in her defense?
Well, from what she said so far, it looks like she will use her mandate, the Public Protector Act, to defend her office. The South African Reserve Bank is challenging her report based on the Public Protector being outside of her jurisdiction to amend the mandate of the bank. But according to her, and she makes use of the Act, the Public Protector is empowered by the Constitution to take appropriate remedial action with regard to any improper conduct in the state affairs or conduct in the state affairs which may result in any impropriety or prejudice. Now, the Reserve Bank is a government institution. Even though it is run independently, the president appoints the governor of the bank. Some experts believe that this implies that this is related to affairs of the state, so it looks likely that she will use her mandate and what she understands by it as her defense in this case.
But let's dig a little deeper into that. As I understand it, the Public Protector in the first place wasn't even asked to review Section 224 of the Constitution, which is where the South African Reserve Bank's mandate comes into play. And the current setup, despite it being a privately held institution, still works fairly well. So why did she review the Reserve Bank's mandate in the first place, despite no one asking her to do that?
Well, that's right. So that recommendation came following her investigation into the bank loan granted to Bancorp, which was then bought by Absa, and this dates back over 20 years ago. Her report said that the South African government and the Reserve Bank had failed to protect the public interest by bailing out Bancorp. And it does seem that this is why this recommendation for the change to the Reserve Bank's mandate was really, it seems she was recommending that Parliament amend the Constitution in order to expand that mandate of the Reserve Bank to include protecting citizens' socio-economic conditions. The argument that she's making is that the Reserve Bank controls South African taxpayers' money, and it was misused in this case with the loan to Bancorp for certain individuals, and this should not be the case going forward. So it was really a recommendation that followed the CX report, her investigation into the CX report, detailing her investigation in terms of that loan.
Indeed, this should be a fascinating legal battle. Thank you for the update. That's Sumitra Naidu there live in Johannesburg, South Africa.